Formula 1 pre-season testing 2019 is nearing the end game. Teams are running out of time to understand their new aerodynamic concepts and refine their setups. We've seen a large variation in approaches across the grid so far. Some teams like Mercedes bringing lots of updates to the car for week 2. Other teams such as Racing Point and Williams maybe a little bit underdeveloped in comparison. I'm joined by our technical experts, Jake Boxall-Legge and the legendary Giorgio Piola, to run the rule over the field so far as we head towards the end of testing. And they're also going to give their rankings for each team a rating out of 10 based on their technical innovations. So coming to you first, Jake, you've been scouring the pit lane, camera in hand, looking at what you can spot under these new regulations. Let's start with perhaps the most obvious team, Mercedes. Lots of updates. What have you made of the work that they've done in testing so far?
Well, they've come this week with a whole new aero package, essentially. Everything's been changed, front wing, nose section's been changed. They've put some work into the side pods as well and just tried to tighten everything up a little bit. There are various noises over what this could be. This is either a brand new specification of car or it's a different specification of car, and they might switch back to the other aero package at some point in the season. We're not entirely sure at this point, but this week, yeah, they've been persisting with what they've brought out, which is the new package. Performance-wise, perhaps seems to be a little bit stronger than the old one. It's more in line with what we would expect from it. So, yeah, Mercedes put a lot of work in over the last few months to try and get these two different packages out, and yeah, it's quite an interesting game plan from them.
And what would you give as your rating for Mercedes out of 10 based on what you've seen from a technical point of view?
Oh, from a technical point of view, I'm going to go 8, a nice solid 8. They've, especially this disparity between the 2 weeks as well, that's a lot of work, that's a lot of design work, a lot of manufacturing to do. There's still room for improvement, certainly. We've seen that from on-track performances, so yeah, let's go with 8.
Okay, and Giorgio, coming to you, Mercedes, obviously you've spent much of your time following Mercedes developments closely throughout the seasons. What have you made of Mercedes 2019 so far?
I think it was a very big surprise to see the other car. And from what I understood, it was a plan view to do 2 cars. One to be able to be immediately reliable, to be immediately on the track, and the other one to be able to push the aerodynamic evolution in the wind tunnel CFD till to the maximum limit to be able to build the car. And I believe this will be the car that will do the season. So I have to say, maybe I am Italian, I'm more passionate than Jackie. I will give a 9 because it really was a big emotion to see 2 different cars. I was already emotional. The first car was already a big step forward compared to last year's car. And the second one, really unbelievable, the work they did. So I will give a good 9.
Okay. Talking about passion brings us neatly to Ferrari, Italian team. Try not to well up with excitement. Giorgio, what do you make of Ferrari's concept?
My passion is not from nationality. My passion is when I see something terribly interesting. Ferrari, I like it, but no big emotion for me.
No?
Because, for example, the front part of the car, the front wing, the chassis, the suspension, they are not terribly different. Okay, the front wing, yes, but all the rest not terribly different from last year. The big work was done under the skin, under the bodywork, so nothing that I could see immediately. They made a wonderful work, but the first impression I was more touched by Mercedes. Okay. But on the track we saw Ferrari is very strong, so again I will give a good 9 to Ferrari too.
Okay. Jake, what do you make of the Ferrari package? I mean, are there any hidden innovations that you've spotted there, or are they just kind of playing it safe at this stage?
I don't know if playing it safe is the right word. I'll be terribly unpassionate now, but they've gone under the skin. But they've really worked on their cooling over the off-season as well. Okay. Obviously, the Ferrari engineers have found something over the off-season that has ensured that the team that deals with the car can compress everything up a little bit, tighten it up, ensure it's more aerodynamically efficient. So you see these letterbox cooling inlets that they've used over the past couple of seasons that they're tightened up. The inlet over the driver's head, that's now very, very small compared to the other teams. So that all develops some kind of aerodynamic advantage as well. But ultimately they're sticking with a tried and tested package that they know works. Obviously, they believe that their concept last year was very, very strong, and they've just opted for a continuation of that. So In development terms, there's not been a whole lot, but we know it was a good package. We know that they're going to be strong out of the box. So I'm going to echo Giorgio here, and I'm going to go with the 9 as well.
9. Mercedes beating 9
Yeah.
for Ferrari. Well, Red Bull Honda will be the team that does its best to bridge the gap and fight with Mercedes and Ferrari this year. All new engine package for that team. A team that obviously famously pushes hard on aerodynamics and packaging. What have you made of the RB15 married to the Honda engine?
Well, it's everything that Red Bull wants from an engine supplier, which is to just package everything as tightly as possible. And ironically, this is exactly what McLaren wanted back in 2015 with the Size Zero concept. And 4 years on, Red Bull now has that, and McLaren doesn't so much because they've gone down a different route. So having the Honda engine, it's going to take some time for them to sort of find out how the relationship works and find their way through it. But out of the box, they've got a very, very tightly packaged car. It's almost like the 2013 Red Bull when we're coming to the end of the V8 era, when that was insanely tightly packaged. And this is...
And a super successful period for Red Bull as well.
Exactly, as well. And they're going to be hoping that they'll find a return to that. Everything just seemed... Again, it's a continuation of last year's car, but everything's just tighter, stronger, better. So I'm going to give it a good old 8.5, I reckon.
8.5, slotting neatly in between Mercedes and Ferrari. Giorgio, are we seeing the same kind of thing from the RB15? Is it a class-leading chassis, in your opinion?
I believe so. Also, if from what I heard from Red Bull people, still not all the pieces are on the car, so there will be some more evolution. They were not very happy at the end of last week testing, but I do believe the cars aerodynamically, but I'm not so expert as Jackie, but from first sight I do believe they are doing a wonderful job, also because there is a tendency, also the other car, they follow much more the shape, especially from the side pods to the back of the car, the shape that Adrian Newey was working on from all these years. And the shape of the side pods at the Coca-Cola in this area, now a lot of cars follow a little bit like this, even Ferrari. What is interesting that Red Bull, they went with a different solution of front wing compared to Toro Rosso. And this is interesting, and is a solution that is a little bit in the middle by Merck and let's say the extreme Alfa Romeo, for example.
Okay. And
so the question mark will be the reliability of the Honda engine.
Yeah.
I do hope, because we need to have a kind of man like Verstappen to be together with Hamilton and Vettel to fight for the championship. It will be wonderful for the sport, and it will be wonderful because Red Bull is a wonderful team. And I could say a 9 minus a little bit. Because I do believe
8.9
between in the middle, not just to copy Jackie, but I will give a little bit plus to Red Bull.
Wow, you technical people in your decimal places. Let's move on to the midfield, because those three teams obviously we expect to be well clear. Renault, the manufacturer team that really should be looking to snap at the heels of Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes, maybe not by the end of this year, but certainly in the long-term plan. What have we made of their new car? Is there anything that stands out technically about the Renault?
There is nothing that really surprised me. I think it's a clever evolution from the car from last year, and we have to say from the middle of the season, Renault, they made a big improvement on their car. So let's hope they will be able to be competitive immediately, maybe behind the top 6, or sometime even fighting for them. I will give a 7.5.
7.5. Jake, Renault might be a little bit disappointed with Giorgio's analysis, considering that they've done much overhaul of their car under the skin.
Yeah.
I think only the power steering system has been carried across. So what have you made of the work Renault has done? Are we expecting to see a lot more from them as the season goes on, or is this a strong package straight out the box?
Well, it's all very well having hundreds or thousands of new components, but if they're not a big step over what you had before, then you
won't see it on the track, will
exactly. And the worrying thing is that I worry that Renault haven't got quite enough investment to bridge that gap to the big three even more. Their investment terms ahead of everybody else, but I don't think they've got enough in the tank to try and push any further. I think it's still going to be another year of not frustration as such, but it's going to be probably another 4th place again. The car, as Giorgio has already said, it's very strongly rooted in what they had last year, just adapted for the new regulations.
Okay.
Things have been changed. There's a lot under the skin, but
it's a strong midfield car rather than a top line chassis.
Yeah, and as far as I know, they're not going to be too far ahead of the other midfield runners. They'll have an advantage, but yeah, if they're disappointed with Giorgio's rating, I'm going to give them a 6.5.
Wow,
so
even lower.
Yeah.
Let's go on to some of the other midfield runners. Haas, a very strong performance last season in the midfield. Probably should have been 4th overall, certainly on pace. What have you made of their new car?
It looks quite good, especially when you're watching them in the corners. It just looks very, very solid. Magnussen and Grosjean, they're not finding it too difficult to get into the corners. I've seen a couple of other drivers, they lock up, snatch brakes pretty easily, but this one, it seems pretty easy to work with.
What would you rate for them?
I'm going to give them a 7. It's
solid.
very, very tentative 7, and we'll be interested to see what Giorgio thinks about it.
Yes, and after your talking, if I gave a 7.5 to Renault, I have to give 8 to Haas, because I do believe they did a good work, a very solid, thinking about not sensational stuff, but to make a solid, reliable car as it was in the last years. And they were always made very good immediately from the beginning. When they came in Formula 1, they was immediately reliable and strong. So even if there is nothing that excited myself in this car, and these are B version, let's say, of the Ferrari, but it will be a good runner.
And what about Alfa Romeo, the other team that partners with Ferrari? Closer ties there now that it's become a quasi-manufacturer team rather than Sauber as before. What do you make of that new car? It looks quite interesting.
Yes, you said exactly. Alfa Romeo for me is much more interesting than Haas. They took some risk to do something different, not only the shape of the nose, but everything. What I do believe they didn't have the potential to do the cooling that Ferrari was doing, and you can see immediately the engine cover, the airbox is much bigger than the Ferrari, and I believe that it is also due to financial problem. So they didn't spend too much money on trying to do this research, but I like this car because there are new ideas, so something interesting. So I will give, even if maybe it's too much, 8.5, just because they show something new.
And would you agree with that, Jake? What would be your rating of the Alfa?
I'm leaning towards that way as well. 8.5 and 9, somewhere in between. 8.75 maybe.
Wow. Wow.
Just because
2 decimal places now.
Just because they've not been afraid to innovate. Sometimes when you're in a midfield runner, if you're playing it too conservative, then you're just sort of following the crowd almost with your own developments, then it might be something slightly compromised with what your actual package is. So you've got to try and create something that's a little bit out there. Something that might compromise you in other ways, but you pick certain tracks and think, okay, we're going to be strong here, 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 and here. Maybe try and swing for a podium. It reminds me of Tyrrell towards the end of their life, when they just decided, okay, we'll innovate and not be afraid to do it, even if it sets us back at some venues.
See what comes off.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'll go with 8.75 if I can do that.
Fair enough. What about some of the perhaps lesser or slightly lower midfield runners? The Toro Rosso, much closer relationship with Red Bull. What do we make of that team? What ranking would you give them?
It's an interesting season for them, isn't it? Because they've essentially carried out the development work for Honda ahead of the tie-up with Red Bull. The car, it looks solid around the circuit, but nothing spectacular. Obviously, there's still room for development. I'm going to give them a tentative 7. Tentative 7.
Giorgio, Toro Rosso.
I do agree on the rate because I will give a 7. But what I'm a little bit sorry that at the end Toro Rosso this year is too close, too similar to Red Bull. While before they was doing something different. Now the concept of the car, the shape, they became like a B version of the Red Bull. The only big difference is the front wing. It's totally different from the one of the Red Bull. I hope they can be a strong team, because we have to not to forget the Toro Rosso. Yes, the old Minardi.
Of course,
and
much
the old
loved
Minardi
team.
for me was a fantastic team, because with very poor money they was doing a wonderful work. And Minardi at that time was introducing a lot of new solutions. And now it's a pity that the Toro Rosso becomes really like a B version of the Red Bull.
That brings us neatly onto the Racing Point. What do you make of the car they've come out with in 2019?
I hope they will come back to 2 years ago, to be very able to be the fourth or the fifth team in the field, because they deserve it. Their mentality is fantastic. Not big stars, but doing always a very solid car. So I will give 7, with the hope they can do even better.
Okay. And Jake, what have you made of the Racing Point design? Anything stand out?
Nothing stands out at the moment, because they're very much pinning everything on what they bring later in the season. This is very much sort of a
launch spec.
Yeah, essentially. So it's just to make sure that they get the running in. They've not been able to do too much because they're quite short on parts at the moment.
So another tentative 7, or you go higher?
I'll go.
Lower?
I'll go with a 6.
6.
But that has the potential to grow come Melbourne. I think there's going to be a point where they'll just throw a little bit more upgrades on the car, but obviously the car's been in development since last season.
Another team that's had a rough time of things, but maybe for different reasons in recent years, McLaren, no longer with Honda obviously. They've had a year now with Renault. What have you made of the MCL 34, which it looks like they had a lot of time to work on that car after switching development off last year's car quite early? Anything excite you about the McLaren?
It looks like it's quite an innovative package. It was a nose design they brought in last season, which they've tweaked. Hopefully they're not going to suffer the same problems as last season, where as soon as they turned in, the downforce just went away. Hopefully that will be sorted out, especially for 2 new drivers as well. It'd be great to see them sort of get off the mark a little bit.
Ratings wise,
I'm going to say 6 again.
More to come.
Yeah, certainly more to come, definitely. It's still very much a work in progress. It's needed a big overhaul, and it's slowly getting that. So yeah, I'll go for 6 for now.
Giorgio, McLaren, what do you make of the MCL 34?
You know, on McLaren, to me, I still have the negative impression of the last season. Especially what surprised me completely negative was when they decided to make a side zero with a new engine, with a new manufacturer, was coming in Formula 1 from many years of being away. For me, that the guy that decided to make a side zero on a brand new engine, I can understand. For me, maybe I'm not clever enough, but for me it was a total disaster to have just this idea. They have to make a solid car, a very reliable car, and then in the future to do. Now maybe they have the facility, they have the knowledge, they have the data to do, as Jackie said, a very extreme car. So I hope to be wrong from my mentality, negative mentality. So I give a 6, me too, but just that I want to be confirmed on the track from the result.
Okay. Only one more team to cover. Williams, they obviously arrived late. Lots of chaos behind the scenes in terms of getting the new car ready. Anything exciting on that design, or is it very much cut adrift, if you like, from the rest of the pack?
No, there are a lot of interesting solutions. We have to see if all these solutions they talk each other in a good way, or they don't understand each other.
Yeah.
Last year, unfortunately, was the second result. They don't understand each other. Still, not carbon fiber gearbox, and last year was suffering always of flexibility in the back, so maybe still can be a problem. Again, I will give even a 6.5 because
wow.
Unfortunately, I'm a little bit linked to this team from the time of Patrick Head when they started, and also Paddy Lowe. So I do believe that can come back again to be stronger. Last season was a disaster, and I believe they can do worse than last year.
Okay, wow, an emotional ranking from Giorgio there. Jake, what's your assessment of Williams? Are you going to be a bit more cutthroat in your ranking of that car?
4.
A 4. Most definitely the lowest ranking.
There's certainly some really interesting bits on that Williams, especially when you look at the mirrors. They're a bit insane. They've put a lot of attention into not exactly the bargeboard package itself, but the parts of the side pod turning vanes, which essentially just harvest some of the wake off the tyre and try and convert it into something useful. That's sort of had a lot of attention paid to it, but the front wing looks quite underdeveloped in comparison to a lot of the other teams.
So again, that sort of suggestion that maybe not everything is totally joined up. That Georgia alluded to.
There's certainly a lot of carryover from last year, which is a little bit worrying. So yeah, certainly I'm going to give it a 4. Hopefully they can change my mind. I really would love them to.